Hi there, my name is David Kenny. Welcome to Life from Above. Glad you could be with us on the program today. Today we have a very special guest with us, a good friend of my family's and myself for many years. This is Don Cooper. Don Cooper has been a resident of Wadsworth since 1985. He's preached here for several years, and we're glad to have him with us. And Don, glad you could be with us on the program today.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be with you today.
Yeah. I want to tell you a little bit about Don, for those of you who may not be familiar with him. I'll show you a picture of him and his brother. I like this picture. This is his brother Denver and them together. Denver and him are about 10 years and 1 day apart. Matter of fact, they often joke around that they missed being twins by 10 years and 1 day. Don was born in Parkersburg, West Virginia on April 3rd in 1933. He was baptized in 1944 by C.D. Plum. His father was a member of the church, and he encouraged both these brothers to preach in every way that he could. He also served as an elder at the North End Church of Christ in Parkersburg as well. And because of the encouragement of their father, both of these men, not only did they preach, but Denver is also the director, or former director, of the West Virginia School of Preaching. He spent many years training other men to preach the gospel as well. So when you talk about the Cooper family, you're talking about whether it be Don or Denver or nephews or whatever, there's a lot of Coopers that are part of the Church of Christ, and they've been very diligent and faithful servants of the church for many years. Let me show you a picture. This is a picture of his lovely wife. This is Jan. Don graduated from Freed-Hardeman College. What year was that, Don?
53.
53. Mm-hmm. And he went to Barber County, West Virginia. Barber County, he met a young lady by the name of Jan Jones. And we've known Jan and Don for many years, probably going all the way back to Barber County, I imagine, to one way or another. Interesting thing, there's a lot of interesting things about Jan, but one of the things that I found interesting, I was doing a little bit of research, is she was baptized by Fred Dennis. And Fred Dennis is a well-known preacher in this area. He used to do a lot of preaching for many years. He's very well known. Interestingly, Fred Dennis, I don't know if you knew this or not, but Fred Dennis actually performed my grandparents' wedding ceremony. Oh. So yeah, we have a lot of things in common. They were married on March 7th, 1954. So they just celebrated 60 years together, and that's a great example for everybody to think about. And it was interesting, as I was reading through this, when you were, right after you were married, you went on a big honeymoon, didn't you?
Yes.
Tell them a little bit what you did since you got married.
Well, we got married in Parkersburg on a Sunday afternoon. My brother actually performed our wedding ceremony, as you may know. And we departed, and our honeymoon existed of visiting Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, the airport actually, which then was an interesting tourist point. And we visited some friends in New Brighton, Pennsylvania, a preacher whom I had attended Freed-Hardeman University with, and his wife. Then we visited my brother and his wife in Weirton, West Virginia. Then we made a trip down to Jan's folks in Philippi, West Virginia, and then back to my folks in Parkersburg, and then we went back to Washington, Pennsylvania, where we began our work with the church there on March the 14th, 1954. We actually began that work with a series of gospel meetings that my brother preached in. And it went for 3 Sundays, 2 weeks and 3 Sundays, at which time we baptized several and restored some and things like that. So we didn't really have much of a honeymoon compared with honeymoons of today, but we were just as happy, and our marriage has endured for this period of time.
Now how did you graduated from Freed-Hardeman? You're from Parkersburg, West Virginia.
Yes, right.
You went to Freed-Hardeman, for those who don't know, Freed-Hardeman's in West Tennessee, Henderson, Tennessee.
Henderson, Tennessee.
And then you end up in Barber County, West Virginia. Now how did you get from, how did you get to Barber County?
Well, actually, my brother and his wife had lived in Barber County, back in the 1940s, the late 40s, and he had preached for several congregations in Barber County, including the congregation of which Jan and her parents and relatives were all members. And so as a teenager, we would gather out on the porch of the meeting house and enjoy one another's company. But I actually didn't come to know her until in Freed-Hardeman, her brother was also a student there. And he and I became better friends. And I guess it was probably through him that I was invited to the Mount Liberty congregation to preach on Sundays, which I did for about 2.5 years after leaving Freed-Hardeman. And on one of my visits there, I was invited to Jan's home for dinner. And I guess, as Paul Harvey would say, that's the end of the rest of the story.
We're still going on. Well, let me show you a picture. This is a picture of Don and Jan's and their 2 daughters. This is Penny, and then Jan, and then Don, and then Sandy. They also adopted twins. They had a twin boy and twin girl. And they've also done quite a bit of work with foster children. I think he told me that you fostered 16 to 17.
Yes, I sort of lost track. Jan tells me it was 17.
17. Mm-hmm. So they've been very involved with young people, whether it be people that they brought into this world, or people they've adopted or fostered. And he's also been involved with a lot of youth people in camp and things like that. So Don and Jan have always been very interested in young people, which is so very important and impressive. A lot of people, the idea of adopting someone is challenging on one level, but fostering, that's a whole different element of trying to take care of children in difficult circumstances. So what was fostering like to you? I mean, what were some of the challenges? There had to be benefits in it, or you wouldn't have been doing it over and over again.
Well, of course, from the very beginning, Jan and I had planned on having a large family. And we had been married for a couple of years and hadn't had a child. So the opportunity presented itself for us to go into the foster care. And this was in Ashland County. And the first foster child we had was a little baby girl, 8 months old, Pamela Jo. And she was a joy. And from that, we went to a little boy 6 years of age. We've had children of all ages and descriptions. We've had good and we've had bad. But the rewards of being foster parents, it far outweighs the difficulties that do come your way. And we truly enjoyed it. And in fact, one of our foster children has remained in touch with us throughout the years, and he is a man now of 60 years of age, and he has children of his own, and they have children. So he's a grandfather, and that makes us a grandparents, I guess, and they do call us mom and dad and grandpa and grandma. So in that particular case, we take great joy, and it was real rewarding.
Yeah. Of course, children, I showed the picture of Penny and Sandy, and,
yes,
and other children were coming into the equation. I'll show you a picture of Don and Jan's extended family there. You can see in that picture he has daughters in there, and he has obviously has grandchildren, even great-grandchildren, I believe. How many great-grandchildren do you have now?
We have 8 great-grandchildren and 1 expected in November.
Oh, very good.
Yes.
Very good. Well, I'll tell you what, one of the things that Wadsworth's having a bicentennial celebration, 200 years. You haven't been here 200 years, but you have been here several years. A lot of people may not realize that. We'll show you the church building here. The building shouldn't be any strange picture to anybody. It's on the program all the time. But I have on here that you served at this congregation from 1985 to 2005. That's 20 years.
Yes.
That's 10% of a bicentennial. Yeah. So Don's been a part of this community. He still lives here, and he lives fairly close to the building. And he has just jotted down some places other places that he has preached. He's preached at several different places, even while being a resident here in Wadsworth. But I just went through and sketched out some of the places that he has worked full time. He mentioned Washington, Pennsylvania. And then other ones I have down: Ashland, Ohio; Toronto, Ohio. That's Ohio, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Mansfield, Ohio; Reynoldsburg, Ohio. And then he spent 20 years here in Wadsworth. And then he also preached at LaGrange. He went back to Mansfield again. And then also he's done some preaching for Cambridge, and now he's doing some preaching at Bucyrus. He's done a lot of television work, radio work, lecturing and preaching. Don's in a lot of demand, and we really appreciate him being able to come in, spend some time with us. While he was at Wadsworth, they were able to the church was able to grow to where they would be able to appoint new leadership. They were able to appoint elders and deacons, and he let me borrow this picture. This is Don and Doug Pell. They were appointed as elders, and these men that are behind them are the deacons that were served. And that was, now what year, that was 2000.
Year 2000, yes,
and
right.
Now what was, when you came here, you didn't have elders and deacons?
No, we didn't.
And what that maybe help people understand the difference, the dynamic. I mean, without getting too specific, because I mean either situation has its challenges. But what's the change in dynamics from having not having elders and deacons to having elders and deacons?
Well, without elders and deacons, of course, you still have leadership, but the affairs of the church are decided more or less by business meetings of the men, and under elderships, then that responsibility goes to them, and then under them, of course, the deacons are assigned particular duties, and all members, of course, serve under the elders, including the preacher. But the elders are the scriptural overseers of the body of Christ, and they meet certain qualifications that are set forth in 1 Timothy chapter 3. You don't have to have all of those qualifications to be necessarily a leader in the church, but you do have to have those qualifications in order to be an elder in the church, and there are certain qualifications that men must have in order to be deacons in the church according to the scriptures.
Mm-hmm. Now, you've obviously, you've been preaching for several years, and you're familiar with a lot of congregations. I'm sure you've been familiar with a lot of elders, deacons, and through this process. It's sort of an opinion question for you. How important are those qualifications that are in the scriptures? I mean, do they really? Some people, they say, well, do they really have to be, some of the, do they really have to have all of these qualifications? Are all of them important? Are they all relevant? What if we shortcut? I mean, what would you think of something like that? If somebody said something like that?
Well, I think if they're in the scriptures, they're important. Mm-hmm. If they weren't important, then the Holy Spirit would not have led the Apostle Paul and others to place them there. I've been blessed to work under some very fine elders in the years that I've been preaching. The first congregation that we served in Washington, Pennsylvania was led by 3 good men who served as elders. And then I have served in many congregations where it lacked eldership. And I can tell you from a personal perspective that the work of the evangelist is made much easier when you have elders to whom you can shift the responsibility, and mm-hmm. you can send the problems to, and you don't have to necessarily be personally involved in some of those difficult matters, or at least you can have their advice. And in many, I find it to be a great advantage as a preacher to have elders that I can serve under.
Because it's all like, you have this huge amount of work. And some places, they want to put all that on one person, mm-hmm. and it's just too much for one person to bear.
That's right.
And I find that churches that are large, that resist having elders, scriptural elders, they're really hurting themselves.
Yes.
Because they're going to put a man in there, and that man's just not going to be able to do everything
Right.
that a congregation needs to have done. And there's definitely an organization there that the Lord has put in place that we need to follow. Now, Don has been preaching for several years. Matter of fact, I had down June 2014, 62 years.
62.
Now, I can remember when it was 50 years, and we have a picture here with his family and also a crowd there at the bottom. This was here in town. This was back in when he had completed 50 years of preaching. Don's done quite a bit of work here in Wadsworth. As I mentioned, he's been in Ohio. He was born in West Virginia. He went to school in Tennessee, but just about all of his probably 98% of your preaching has been here.
Yes, we spent a few years in Washington, Pennsylvania, and we spent 5 years in Moundsville, West Virginia, which was a great work. And we spent 7 years in Baltimore, Maryland.
Okay.
And aside from those, we have been in the state of Ohio. In fact, when we got ready to leave Maryland, my wife and I both agreed that if we ever got back to Ohio, we would never leave. We like Ohio so well, and it's been a great blessing to us in our lives. We've thoroughly enjoyed our work with the people in Ohio, and it's been a joy to live in Wadsworth all these years. We have wonderful neighbors. We had a great church to work with, and so leaving is something that we would really have to think long about before ever doing that. And of course, we have family, of course, in Tennessee. We have the daughters, and we have the grandchildren, and
that's why I said, uh-oh.
They would love for us to come there.
Sure.
And we have thought seriously about doing that. But on our way home, we think, I don't know. We like Ohio. We have so many friends. We have so many close ties in the state of Ohio and in the Wadsworth area that it would be a difficult decision for us.
Sure. Well, Don, why don't you tell them a little bit more about, you've been here 20 years at the congregation. Why don't you tell them a little bit more about your work, when you were here located in Wadsworth, just so people have an idea, some of the things that were going on over the past 20 years when you were here.
Well, of course, we had a very vibrant congregation, and among the things that we enjoyed so much were the vacation Bible schools each summer. We had huge vacation Bible schools. We also had displays at, like the sidewalk sale. I think that's still going on in Wadsworth. Sure. You still have an exhibit there. We at one time also had the exhibit at the Balloon Festival. I don't know if very many people remember the balloon festivals or not, because it seemed like that every year when the Balloon Festival time came around, we had bad weather, and so that kind of went by the side. But we one time had distribution of a good newspaper that was published and sent into every house in Wadsworth, and that produced a lot of good for us. We also had Wadsworth Early Education that met in our facilities, I believe, for about 10 years, if memory serves me correctly. And that gave us an opportunity to meet a lot of parents, a lot of opportunity to meet small children, things like that. So we really enjoyed that. We gave away food and clothing on numerous occasions, and the things that I remember most are the gospel meetings that we had, including, I think, maybe 2 with your father. And
at least 2.
And he stayed with us in our home during those gospel meetings. We also hosted Friday night sings, and sometimes people are not acquainted with what we call gospel singing, but we have a cappella. We sing, And it's an hour and a half spent with congregational singing, in which surrounding congregations come and visit, and their song leaders participate, and it's just an evening of real joy of praising the Lord in songs. Jan and I hosted singles dinners in our home for a few years, and that was quite popular. We had a genuine time of fellowship and games, and people would bring dishes and we would eat together, and it was just really a really wonderful time. Of course, we had our fellowship dinners regularly at the church, and during those times we would observe birthdays and celebrations or other special occasions in the lives of the members of the church, and this was fun as well as a great period of fellowship. But there were just so many things that I call, the weddings that I performed. I always took great joy in them, and unfortunately, we also lost several members to death, and those people, I think of them fondly yet to this day. Some people that were very helpful to us in building the congregation.
A lot of good memories.
A lot of good memories. Many good memories.
I was listening, but did you mention the area men's meetings?
No, I also had the area men's meeting. I don't remember just exactly when I started that, and I came here in June of 1985. Bob Eddy, a good friend of ours, was preaching at Lorraine at the time, and he and I got together one day, and he said, "We need to have an area men's meeting," and asked me if I would host it, and so I agreed to do that, and I did that, I think beginning probably in 86, 87, somewhere along in there. And that has continued to this day, and you're doing a fine job of hosting that even now. And I enjoy getting to attend that. And
I always enjoyed it. You had me come and speak when I was working in industry.
Yes.
So I always enjoyed it. Well, let me show this other picture. This is a picture from the 2010 West Virginia School of Preaching and Lectureship. You're honored they dedicated that book to you, if I recall correctly, and the picture of you there receiving recognition for that, and of course your brother's there on the right to you. I almost cropped him out of there, but I just couldn't do it. So, very glad to see you be recognized for that. Now, Don is preaching for the Bucyrus Church of Christ, and we'll show you a little bit of information about the church there, the meeting times and the address and the phone number. They meet on Sundays at 10:30, and then in the evening at 5:30. They also have Bible study at 9:45 and Wednesday evening Bible study at 7 o'clock. And they also host a one-day lectureship, and that's each November. So that'll be coming up soon. If you're ever in the Bucyrus area, obviously the phone number's there. If you don't know how to find it, just give them a call. They'll help you, direct you to be able to find it. They have a nice facility. I was there not too long ago. They just had an excellent gospel meeting with Albert Farley. And so it's a very nice group of people, very nice facility, and nice town. So if you happen to be in that area, we encourage you to go and visit with them. We're just about out of time, Don. Is there anything that you'd like to say in the last few minutes we have? A few seconds, actually.
I'd just like to say that the honor at the School of Preaching and the book was dedicated to me and my wife, Jan, in honor of our service for the church there.
You didn't do it alone, did we?
No.
Yeah, we didn't.
No, I've had her by my side all these years.
Yeah, she's always been a lovely lady. Well, thanks for watching our program today, and tune in next time, and Don will deliver a lesson for us. Thanks for watching Light from Above.
Calculator, timer, flashlight, selected, screen recording, button.